I'm up now. Okay. I'm an alcoholic. My name is Bill. I wore this tie because I was referred by my spiritual advisor, Jim P. over there. I was told if I'm too busy to pray, I'm busier than God intended me to be. So if we could just have a moment of silence. Me inspiration, intuition, carry your message. Amen. As I said, I'm an alcoholic. My name is Bill. It doesn't make any sense that I'm asked to do anything in this fellowship. Not because I don't want to, and not because I don't qualify. Believe me, I do. I came in and out of these rooms for 42 years. And to get a sobriety date till April 17th of 2022, my first intentional meeting was May the 7th of 1981. And the only thing I can attribute it to is that I sincerely took position that I was going to no longer run my life. And just what the big book says came to pass. All sorts of remarkable things have come to follow. It's amazing. Wow, the guy's getting a kidney. The person donating the kidney is not a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. Actually, I think he's at a colonel or someone who is a patriot. And I promise you that whoever's giving him the kidney is not running around telling everyone he's donating the kidney. I give someone a quarter for a shopping cart at Aldi's and I put it on Facebook. No, I want everyone to know what I do good. And that leads me to the reason why maybe it was very difficult for me to stay sober. I never got how selfishness and self-centeredness, I had to be rid of it or it was going to kill me. I had no idea what that meant. I did not know how to live life. And I thought, what am I going to talk about? 40 years of failure. And when I talked to Stephen and he told me more about the meeting, this is a meeting that's run for 5.5 years consecutively, carrying the message of Alcoholics Anonymous. And at the time, you couldn't get to a physical meeting because the world shut down. And you guys are going strong. And then I'm referred by Jim, 53 years sober, and I came in here and couldn't put anything together. And he comes and hears me all the time. I'm starting to wonder if something's wrong with him. And I was thinking about, so I asked God today, I didn't know what I was going to say, and that's probably best. I don't have anything planned, and then I say, why am I even speaking? And now you want me to speak till 5 to 9. I'm one of those 5-minute story guys, so I'm talking slower than normal. But what came to my mind, and this is not to convert anyone or to unconvert anyone. I remember reading a story about a guy named John, and he had these disciples. And he sent his disciples over to talk to this other guy named Jesus. And he said, go ask him if he's the one that we've been waiting for, or should we wait for another? So they went over and asked Jesus, and he didn't answer them. He said, you go tell John what you have seen, how the lame walk and the deaf hear and the blind see, how the poor are taken care of and the hungry are fed. And maybe the only reason that I'm here tonight is I want to tell you, I want to tell you what I've seen. Just because I didn't stay sober didn't mean I didn't see the greatest show on earth. I remember I was in Illinois and a gal came up to me. Let me qualify real quick. I picked up a drink, and with each and every drink I picked up, I got thirstier. I met the condition of the doctor's opinion, what we call the allergy. If there are new people here tonight, welcome to Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't want to tell you stay because that's frothy emotional appeal. And then how it works is as if you want what we have. And sometimes I think we forget that it's not incumbent upon the new person to know what we have. It's incumbent upon us to let them know what they have. Because if all I do is tell you drunken stories, I did that once at a detox. I took a meeting into detox and told them how alcohol and the other stuff ruined my life. And finally, a guy in the front row said, "We know that, yo-yo. That's why we're here. Can you give us something better?" Well, I want to have hope, our testimony, our stories to disclose in a general way what we used to be like, what happened, and what we are like now. And that's what I try and do. Each person in his own personal language tells the way that he approached and engaged and accessed his power of God of his understanding. It's that simple. So I meet the description of the allergy. When I drink, it doesn't satisfy my thirst, it produces a greater one. It doesn't quench it, it creates it. And if that was my only problem, then all I have to do is not drink, and I would never have that happen. The problem is something goes on inside of me when I'm sober. Abstinence becomes more painful than the consequences of my drinking, and I drink again. I was told by some people who knew more about this thing called alcoholism than I did. Step one doesn't mean I can't drink again, and it doesn't mean I'll want to or not want to drink again. It tells me that without help, I will drink again. And I was thinking about this as I shaved because I wanted to look nice. You know, it's important how you look in AA. And I was thinking the doctor's opinion says what happens by the time I get to a position in life where I need help outside of myself, something greater than myself, you guys, a power, a God, whatever it is. My life seems the only normal one, and I cannot differentiate the true from the false. And I always assumed they meant while drinking, where the doctor was referring to drinking alcoholics. I remember being sober an appreciable period of time for me. I had been given a job at my brother's mortgage company. I don't know if no one else would hire me, but he did. And I remember on the Sunday I was bored and I wanted to get into this underground poker game. And I got a call from two doctors, a husband and wife, and they asked me to meet them at the office. They wanted to talk about the prospect of doing a loan, and they were very satisfied with what I told them. They said, "We'd like to go ahead with the loan." And I said, "You're going to need to write a check for $400 for the appraisal." They said, "No problem. Who do we make it out to?" Well, I'm like Ford. I have a better idea than me. I said, "I don't really know who the appraiser is." And that was kind of true. I suspected I knew who was going to do it. I said, "Just leave the check blank and we'll put the appraisal name in when we figure out who it is." And they left and I closed the loan and I went down to the card game and I tried to get them to take the unnamed check to buy into the poker game. And they didn't let me buy in, and I wasn't very happy about it. The next day I ran into my sponsor at a meeting and I said, "Larry, I got a resentment. They wouldn't take this check from this doctor whose money was better than mine to let me into this poker game." And another guy in AA was standing there. He had come in through the ranks and ended up, he was a bailiff. And he said, "I didn't mean to eavesdrop." But he said, "Do you know that what you just described, it borders on fraudulent behavior, and at the very least is misappropriation of funds?" I said, "Okay," and he walked away. And my sponsor looked at me. He said, "Did you hear what Tom just said to you?" I said, "Yeah, I heard it." He said, "What do you think about that?" I said, "I think some people read too many law books, Larry, because if they would have taken the check and I'd have lost the money, my brother would have covered it for me." And he looked at me. He said, "Hasn't your brother cleaned up enough of your messes?" That was normal to me. It's the way I thought. We were brothers. We loved each other. I would help him. I was never in a position to, but I would. You know, he never called me for bail money or bond money or lawyer money, but I'd have given it to him if he did. But that's how skewed my thinking was sober. And I did not realize that that was the unmanageability of my life. My thinking was so flawed. When they say the problem centers in the mind, I always thought they were talking about the second component, the obsession that always compelled me to take the first drink, setting the cycle in motion when abstinence became more painful than drunkenness. That's half of it. My thinking's flawed, even if the obsession and the allergy were my only problem. My solution is not to put myself around a position that if the obsession hit, I could get my hands on a drink and I'd never put it inside me and I'd never drink again. But it's almost like sober. And I didn't get this till one of the counselors came into the Salvation Army on one of my many trips to treatment when God was saving my life. And I thought I was always being punished. He came in and gave a group on under the influence of alcohol. And I knew he was going to talk about like driving drunk, but he was talking about being 25 years sober down in your neck of the woods, Jim. He was over there in Cape Coral. Good guy, Tom. A lot of guys named Tom have carried the message. My brother's name's Tom. I ought to pay attention to the next Tom. Might have the winning lotto numbers for me. Well, he came in and he was doing a group and he called it Under the Influence. But he wasn't talking about drunkenness. He said when he was 23 years sober, as part of his annual vacation, he goes out on the Gulf and does deep sea fishing. He loves it. It's his passion. It's his hobby. And he said he was out there when it was a couple of years before this talk that he was given. He said it was the most beautiful day that I've ever had. He said the fish were biting. The sun was shining just right. It wasn't too hot. He said the wind was blowing. He said, what a perfect day. And he said, suddenly the thought occurred to me that the only thing that could make this occasion better was a bottle of bourbon. And he said, I said to myself, Tom, and I knew he was going to say that's a stupid idea, but here's what he said. He said, no, what would make this occasion better would be a case of bourbon. And he said, I realized that at 23 years sober, 30 miles from anywhere I could get a drink, I was under the influence of alcohol. And another piece of the puzzle came to mind. It talks about how it works. Remember, we deal with alcohol. We don't deal with it. No one here's drinking that I can see. If you are, no big deal. Keep coming. Remember that we deal with alcohol, cunning, baffling, powerful. Without help, it is too much for us. So if I'm under the influence of alcohol, or if he was under it 23 years, he was a member of AA doing service and taking the steps, had a home group, a bunch of service commitments, sponsees, and a sponsor. If after 23 years of that habitual training, he could be under the influence of alcohol, then I didn't stand a chance because I didn't do much. I didn't do much. I came to AA in part of the way that I thought what seemed normal to me is I would get someone to take the steps for me and I'd have a spiritual awakening. Why not? I was pretty smart. I could find someone who would do it. I didn't have a clue. I didn't know how to live life. I promise you I didn't know how to live life. And I kept turning my will and my life over to human beings that didn't know how to do much of a better job running their life. And I wonder why I kept picking up a drink again and burning my life to the ground. I really didn't want to. Sometimes some well-meaning people in AA, maybe they weren't alcoholic or maybe they weren't of the hopeless variety. They'd look at me and said, the reason you drank is because you wanted to drink more than you wanted to stay sober. And it kind of felt like that. I got that. I get that. But what didn't make sense is why I couldn't stay sober when I wanted to stay sober more than I wanted to drink. That's that powerlessness. That's that beyond human aid that I stepped into, the region that I crossed to which there is no return for human aid. I was there. And it didn't matter if I went to meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, went to church, or stood in a grocery store. When the obsession to drink was on me, I had no defense and I picked up a drink. It just seemed natural. It seemed like my body would be writhing on the way to get a drink. There was nothing on earth that was going to stop it. I know that for sure. And I remember finally being 90 days sober. And the thinking started to take place. I picked up my 90-day chip. And the thinking started to take place. And all of a sudden it seemed surreal, like 3 hours after the meeting where I picked up my 90-day chip had passed. I was up and down, driving up and down the streets of St. Pete, like in a trance. My hands were gripping the wheel. My knuckles were right. I got that bubbly stomach, whatever you want to call it. I looked in the mirror. It's like I was possessed. I was just looking for someone to talk to. And the only thing that I had done right, or what I had done consistently, was I had called my sponsor every day. If you're new, a sponsor, someone, a tour guide, to get you through the minefield with every piece you started with. Not me, I got blown up all over the place, but I called my sponsor. I had gone to his house every day, and I had gone to meetings with him. And for some reason, I think just by habit, I picked up the phone and called my sponsor, and I said, look, I've had a battle with this forever. I'm just one of those who can't get this thing, Jim. I want to thank you for what you've done for me. Thank you for what you've tried to do. And I just want to apologize. And he said, what's going on? I said, I'm going to drink and I can't stop myself because anytime I ever had that mindset, I always was pulled into the abyss, whether I wanted to go or not. It was just like they told me alcoholism is like having sex with a gorilla. It ain't over till the gorilla says so. And guess what? Sometimes the gorilla ain't done with me when I pick up my white chip. It's a whole lot more than coming to AA and counting days and picking up chips. And he said, listen, he said, come over to the house and everything will be okay. I said, Jim, I'll never make it there. He said, why not? I said, because I got to pass ABC liquor and I'm convinced that a bottle will jump in my car and I'll be struck drunk. He said, then get down on your knees and go know that God will be there. And I don't know why I listened to him. I hung up the phone. I didn't even believe in God at the time. I promise you, I drank that up. But for some reason, I believed my sponsor. And I got down on my knees, and I don't know if I was on my knees for 30 minutes or 30 hours or 30 seconds. But when I stood up, I was free. Something greater than me had entered me and removed that which I could never get rid of on my own power, and I started to come to believe. You know, we did a two speaker meeting. I went first. He was sober. Like I told you, I'm a good 5-minute speaker. I'm just trying to get this out because you asked me to. And he did the second speak, and I told that same story I just told you. And on the way home, he said, you know, that was a good job. And he said, you know, I clearly remember your 90th day sober. And I vividly remember the conversation we had. He said, and I specifically remember you telling you to come over to my house. He said, but I never told you to get down on your knees. I would never say that. And it dawned on me, if an alcoholic will humble himself and ask for help, whether the person that's given the help knows he's given the help, whether the one asking for the help knows where the help come from, or maybe the person wasn't there at all. God could and would if he were sought. I never got that. I never gave him room to come in. I tried to manage well. You guys would be maybe horrified at me. I got a couple years sober. And I found a girl in AA that she just found me very attractive. She came from an alcoholic home. That's all I can attribute it to. I reminded her of her dad. This was a special girl. Her dad had developed the entire town in which I lived and a couple other towns, and he was very successful and very wealthy. And I knew that she stood to inherit a very substantial trust fund, half of it when she turned 32 and half of it when she turned 35. So when she asked for my hand in marriage, I said, God could and would if he were sought. I made a decision based on self. You know, in the fourth step, which put me and a lot of other people, I'm always looking at the hurt that I've been put in, but it put me and a whole lot of other people in a position to be hurt. She made the top of my 4-step list, her and her dad. Of course, I hated him because he bought her gifts that I couldn't afford. I remember, let me tell you how spiritually sick I was. 4 years without a drink, in a marriage with a daughter. And she decides to be the first one in her family to get a college degree. And of course, she goes to a top-notch liberal school, Baldwin Wallace, very expensive, very private, very small. The night of the commencement, I'm using big words, Jim. I think that means when they graduate. If it means they start, I got it backwards. But you guys know the night she was supposed to throw her hat off her tassel over, it poured so badly that for the first and only time in Baldwin Wallace history, they had to cancel the ceremony. And I gloated. I didn't know why. That's not love. Love does not rejoice in evil. Sick, selfish alcoholics do, and that was a sober condition, untreated. We went back to the house and they had a party, and her father bought her this necklace that was probably a whole year's worth of my income. And I hated him and I hated her, and I didn't know why. We were growing apart, and I didn't know that I was the one producing what she called the schism. I didn't forget that I'm going to tell you some good things that I've seen here in AA, I promise you. Just letting you know that I belong. Drunk or sober, I have the disease of alcoholism. Left untreated, I do a lot of damage to a lot of people. Sometimes other people were better off when I was drunk or locked up or in treatment or in a psych ward. When you make a decision to marry someone based on what they can give you rather than what you can bring to the table, that's not love. It's called self. And that's what destroys me and destroys most of us. So I started acting outside of the marriage. Money, property, prestige, pomp, worship of other things, and calamity began to dominate my life. And the reason she was on my fourstep is because she divorced me 6 months before she got the first half of her trust fund. I said, I put in 8 years for that money. And that's the way I looked at things. That wouldn't have been so bad, but we had a daughter out of that marriage. And as a result of my infidelity and my relapse, because I relapsed after you can't stay sober cheating on your wife, at least I can't. Spiritual life's not a theory. We have to live it. It said that in the book. I never understood that. I thought if I professed belief in God and went to church on Sunday, that was sufficient. That had nothing to do with recovery. I was blocked from the power within, not from the power without. The spiritual umbilical cord that I believe we're all born with that goes directly from my spirit to his was so coagulated and blocked by dishonesty, resentment, drunkenness, and all the debauchery that I engaged in. It's like the Shawshank Redemption. Karen, I'm from Cleveland. Karen's from Madison. Well, down in Mansfield, Ohio, they filmed it at the Ohio State Penitentiary, Mansfield Reformatory. I never knew that. But the interesting thing about that movie is when Andy decided that he was going home, he had to take action. He made a decision, and then he took action. And the way he got to freedom is he had to funnel through 200 meters of feces. But when he got out the other side and the rain was coming down, he was free at last. See, I didn't know that the power was within me, and what was blocking me was the stuff I was hanging on to, the hatred and the manipulation. The sad thing about that divorce is because of my behavior, she retaliated. What she did has made it very difficult for me to see my daughter, thinking she was benefiting my daughter and punishing me. But what happened is my daughter grew up without the benefit of knowing whether her dad loved her or not. You know, I shared this in a meeting earlier today, and it just kind of came to me. The book says God will constantly disclose. That was back in 1993. The divorce was final, one day before 8-year wedding anniversary. And my daughter at that time was was 6 years old. Do you know the first Christmas, I made it all about me? Oh my God, I don't have my daughter. You know what? I wanted to know if my wife was sleeping with anyone else. That's the truth. I'll tell you guys that. I won't tell the judge that. He'd up my child support and alimony, but I'll tell you because guess what? You can't hurt me no more with the truth. That's what was going on inside of me, decision based on self. But I know that it bothered me. But worse than that, it bothered my mom because my mom loved grandkids. I forgot to tell you that at 17 years old, I got a girl pregnant in high school. They didn't have the laws that they do now, and I wasn't signing no papers. I couldn't take care of a gerbil, couldn't hold a job, I couldn't live, and I ran out of fear. Everyone knew it was my daughter, including me, but I denied it. I stuck my head in the sand. Both of those daughters, and we've had some type of conciliation since that time. One I've been able to see, and one has not seen me yet. Both of them had the same questions. Did you love me? Did you wonder what it was like when I went to from elementary school to kindergarten? For you women to understand, I didn't know first menstrual cycle, my first date, my prom. Did you think about me? Oh, the very thing that was done to me as a child, I was doing and couldn't stop it. And I swore I would never do that. I was never going to be like my dad. I couldn't stop it. You know, they say we love the things we hate and hate the things we love. When I was a kid, I loved my dad with all my heart, and I just hated his addiction. When I picked up the first one, I loved the disease and hated my dad. Out of that hatred, I torture and hurt people. The daughter grows up without a dad. My mother grows up without seeing the grandkids, my brothers and sisters and their kids, no relatives. You get the picture. But what I thought about was after the second year, it probably didn't hurt so much at Christmas time. And after the third year, I started to forget the sound of my daughter's voice. And in year 4 or 5, I forgot what she looked like. I was telling Jim, alcoholism erases what I can see in this realm. It took the marriage, it took my health, took some of my mind. I couldn't see that, but I knew it was going. I remember David told me, he said, every time you come back to AA, he says, there's less of you left. And he wasn't talking about my body. It was just taking me a bit at a time, a bite at a time. And insidious, not only does it erase the physical, it erases the memories. And I believe the diabolical nature of this disease is engaged in alcoholism long enough. It'll get me, it will put me in a position where I will forget that I was made, that I'm a child of God, that I have a divine inheritance. It'll make me believe that there isn't one to erase all of that. Thank God for Alcoholics Anonymous. If you're on the tape, back to the story, I was at a meeting in Chicago, and a lady said to me, what are you doing Thursday night? And I said, I guess I'm doing something for you. She said, I need a ride downtown next to the Cook County Jail. She said, I got to speak to on the Mothers Against Drunk Driver panel. And I said, I can do that for you. I knew service was right. And I picked her up. And the reason she was doing this was not only as part of the consequences of her DUI, but for absolution of herself. She had killed a woman in a blackout driving, DUI manslaughter. It was not her first DUI. She had many. And what she described is, she said, when I was in the jail, she said it took them 2 days to bond me out. And I was so mad they had to post a $30,000 cash bond. And someone had to sign their house. And she said, I promised God if he'd get me out of jail, I would never drink again. And she said, when my boyfriend or her brother, whoever picked her up, she said, what took you so long? And she said, by the time I got back to Lake County, I had stopped 3 jitter joints and picked up a drink. She said, I went through that court thing. I didn't stay sober. I was so angry. And what had happened was, she got a break. She didn't have to do any prison time. I said, wow, how's that possible? She said, well, I'm going to tell you how that's possible. She said the first night that she gave her testimony at this Mother Against Drunk Driving charges, she said, I was walking in ready to tell my story and let these people know the real devastation of drinking and driving. I'll scare them sober. And she said when she walked up and was being introduced, she said the lady introducing her was the advocate for the family of the mother that she killed. And she said, my knees buckled. She said, my knees buckled, all that pride and ego fell out of me. And she said, I got up there and shook and I told my story. And when all the clients left, she said, and we were the last 2 to go, me and the gal who had introduced me, she said, you did a great job tonight telling your story. You really carried a message here to the people who need to hear it. She said, you know, you got a real lenient sentence for taking someone's life in DUI manslaughter. She said, yes, I did. She said, you probably don't know why. She said, I do know why. She said, I had the best lawyer that money could buy. And the advocate said, that you did. She said, but what you didn't know is 2 of the children were members of Alcoholics Anonymous. And they asked us to go lenient on you because you suffered from what they suffered from, and there before the grace of God go I. I'm a member of that fellowship. That's Alcoholics Anonymous. I had a friend of mine who burnt his life to the ground after he had had 13 years sober and had everything there was to get from AA. He ended up in the Salvation Army, gave up his landscaping business, his house, his wife left him. He burned it up, smoked it up, drank it up. It was all gone. And he starts going to meetings. You know, I didn't know that the third step that we were chronic malcontents. It talks about it. I complain about the politics, the stuff that I know nothing about, but give me something to talk about, and I will. I'll give you my opinion on anything. Just ask me. And sometimes I'll fight it, even though I know I'm wrong about it, you know, just to be contentious. Comes to the meetings every night and complain, and he had to get a sponsor to stay in this treatment program. And the sponsor said, you know, quit complaining. Why don't you get outside of yourself and help someone? He said, what could I possibly do to help someone? He said, I have nothing. I'm in this treatment center. They're still coming at me in all directions. The house is in foreclosure. The wife lost everything. His sponsor said, stand at the door and shake hands. He said, I can do that. He started standing at the door each week and became what we call a greeter down there. Probably call them that here. And they do it here. You guys all welcomed everyone as they came in. And you had a waiting room. I thought they weren't going to let me in one day, and they put me in a waiting room. It's like time out. He started shaking hands. And one night, one of the home group members came in. An elderly lady put out his hand and he welcomed her there. And he said, how are you today? And he said, she burst down. She started crying. He said, oh, what's wrong? His heart got a little softer, he said. And she said, I don't know if you know this or not, Myron, but I buried my husband of 40-some years today. He said, I'm so sorry to hear that. And he said, his heart softened. He said, is there anything I could do? And she'd known from his sharing that he had owned a landscape company. And she said, come to think of it. He said, I'll need someone to cut my lawn. Maybe you could help there. And he said, oh, it would be my honor. He got so excited that he got her address. And the next day he got up and he had to take a bus. He was still in his treatment place. He had to walk a mile or so in the heat, but he was excited he could do something for someone else. He got up to the door and he told her that he was there. So he didn't start. He knocked on the door and she said, great. And he went out to the shed and he opened it up and it was empty. He went back to the door and he said, I forget if her name was Florence or Mildred, but it doesn't matter what her name is. She was just an older lady with that kind of name. And he went up and said, Mildred, where's the lawnmower? And kind of absentmindedly, she said, oh, come to think of it, we don't have one. He said he got so mad, he had to walk all the way back to the bus stop and wait an hour there and catch a bus back to the treatment center, and couldn't wait till the next night to get to the home group to tell his sponsor that he couldn't even help a lady cut a lawn. He was useless. The following morning, he said, for whatever reason, you hear these stories in AA, you can't make them up and you can't see them in Hollywood, but you know they're real. He's walking his garbage day, and behind his garbage can, he says he sees the silver handlebar sticking up. Curiosity got him. He goes over, it's a lawnmower. He said, who would throw out a good lawnmower? He kind of looked at it, pulled the handle back and pulled the ripcord on the second pull. It started right up. He said he got so excited, he pushed it all the way over to her house and said, I'm here. And he cut her lawn. He got so excited, he forgot about his uselessness. He burst into the home group that night and told his sponsor, God gave me a lawnmower to cut Mildred's lawn. And his sponsor, being a good sponsor, keeping things in check, said, Myron, next week when you cut her lawn, don't come and tell us about it. He said, what do you mean next week? He said, Myron, we follow through in AA. And so week by week, he started to go out and cutting her lawn, and his life got better, and they became friends, and he's moving on in the program. And pretty soon she has lemonade ready for him and then a sandwich for lunch. And pretty soon they made a half a day a deal out of it. That's what we do in AA. We make fast friends. And he graduates his program and he takes an aptitude test. And he finds out his assignment, right? What does it say in the 4-step inventory? Where the fear is, when I quit relying on me, God reveals my assignment. I'm in the world to play the role he assigns. He doesn't play hide and seek with it. I do. He doesn't make hard terms. I do. Oh my God, what a life he had. He helps the lady and his life opens up. He takes his aptitude test and there's a grant for this program. He gets involved. Straight A's. It's like a glove to a hand. He said it fit perfect. He knew he was created for that. Everything's going wonderful, straight A's. He makes it through the first year and the second year. All the funding dries up. He goes back to the home group, complaining to the sponsor, can't do nothing right. His sponsor said, "What? Hey, we don't have that. Why are you coming to me?" He said, "Go talk to the school." And he goes to the school. He talks to the people in academic, and he said, "I'm straight A's." He said, "I know that I was on a bad run, but I promise you, if you can get me some grant, some loan, some money, let me complete this. I know God wants me to do this. I promise, I signed, I'll pay it back." He said, "You're talking to the wrong people, Myron. You got to go see the financial people." He went to them with the same story, and they said in his name, he just recently passed, Myron Bugalowski. He said, "Mr. Bugalowski, there's no funding available. Nothing else. All the government money's run up. There's nothing available." He said, please open up my dossier and see what I qualify. There's got to be something." And they got out his file and they opened it up. And she looked at him and said, "Your tuition's been paid in full." He said, "That's impossible. I don't have any money. I don't know anyone." He turned the paper over and said, "Do you recognize this name? The lady who he greeted at the door when her husband died left her more money than she could spend in this lifetime or the next. And she paid for his education because he was a member of AA, and so was she." Wow, it was impossible what he could see, but with God, all things are possible. When I heard that story, Jim, I went to Cleveland and I said, "Does anyone need their driveway shoveled?" I'm looking for a blessing. Now, that may not be the way the gift comes to you. And that may not be the way AA comes to you. But I promise you, that's the God of anonymity and Alcoholics Anonymous. The book says everything I need is provided. All I got to do is stay close to him and perform his work well. For the last 2 years, 9 months, and 2 weeks, I have stayed very close to him, and I do my best to perform his work well. I had a surrender experience. I'm not going to take you through it. I'm sure most of you have it. It's when I give up. But it wasn't my idea to give up. I thought I invited God in, but what he did was surrendered me. If I could have turned my will and my life over to God, I wouldn't have needed God. I didn't get it at the end of step 3. It says we had to have his help. We must be rid of me or it kills me. How am I going to get rid of me with me? I've got to have God. And he surrendered me through a series of events that I don't believe can be duplicated. And within a week, I say it was 4 days, but it might have been a week, I was looking at a comprehensive 4-step inventory of the decisions I made based on self. And I took them levels to how I showed up with resentment, how it blocked me from God, how I judged people, how I couldn't hear anything in AA because I was so obstinate, so agnostic, and didn't know it. My sponsor said, "You're the most agnostic Christian I've ever met." I was blocked from the power. And all of a sudden, by this invitation, this position of being surrendered, God came in and cleaned out the house because I asked him, "I can't do it no more. I give up. I surrender. I quit quitting. It's over." Yellow streak down my back, throw in the towel, no courage. You call it what you want. And I believe that he takes that invitation dead serious. And he came in, I believe that I held the pen and he did the writing. That's all I can't tell you anymore because I began to realize, like it says in step 4, the realization was that my problems were of my own making. Centered in my mind, I made decisions based on self, getting my way at all costs, arranging the lights, trying to get people to do what I want, everyone be happy. And what I did is I produced confusion everywhere I went rather than harmony. I was in collision with everybody. And all of a sudden it was down on paper. When I got done with my 5th step, I told my sponsor, I don't know if I was at the point where I felt free yet because I hadn't gone home for an hour, but I told him, "Oh my God, for the first time in 4 decades, I'm ready to go on to step 6 and 7. He said, "Hold on, Sparky. I don't know about that." I said, "What?" He said, "I believe this is a 3-part step." Well, by this time, I've been coming to AA longer than my sponsor. Hell, I've been coming longer than anyone at the time. I'm still alive. I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "I believe it says we admitted to God, comma, means break in thought, to ourselves, comma, another break in the sentence, and to another human being." He said, "I bear witness that you shared your 5th step with me, and by your writing and confession, I know you've shared it with yourself. But have you talked to God about what you did with the gifts he gave you, the people that you've harmed? Have you admitted to God?" And I think those 5 questions are the 5 for the mortar, concrete, cement workers. I'm not much of a laborer. You can see I'm overweight, bald, and my teeth come out at night. But other than that, I'm a good guy. It asks some real specific questions. Are you trying to do that the guy that I described to you 40 minutes ago tried to do, get someone to take the steps from me, get the benefit? That try and cut corners, and how it works. It says, those who cannot or will not completely give themselves to the simple program. I've never completely given myself to anything, including a marriage. I already told you that. And every relationship prior to that ended the same way. And a restraining order, judge saying, "They don't want you around no more." You're expensive to love. You're selfish and self-centered. You're cheap chisel mooch. They all ended like that. Did I try and keep something to my sponsor because I was embarrassed? Did I try and hide something from God as if that wasn't capable of doing that? Did I try and sweep something under the rug that I knew was true but didn't want you to know or didn't want to admit to myself? I answered those questions, all saying, I've given it all up. And I remember that my mind was brought to that 51st Psalm. For any of you read that book, The Songs of David, or the Songs, whatever they call them. And what happened is this guy had got some lady pregnant that he had no business sleeping with because she was married. And then when the guy was going to find out, he sent him off and had him killed. Now, I didn't go that far, but I came close. But what happened is when he was exposed by a sponsor, they called it a prophet, came up and told him a story. When he was exposed, he repented and he said, God, please forgive me. I've sinned against you. Please withhold not your spirit from me. And that's the position I found myself in after my 5th step. And when I sat for an hour with my God and talked to him, I said the same prayer. And I know that God heard me, and I know that he forgave me, and I know that he didn't withhold his spirit. And I was delighted I could look the world in the eyes. I'm not done making all my amends yet. You know that at that moment I was entirely ready for him to take everything, and I believe that he's quite capable and willing to do so, and will. It doesn't mean I won't reach in the arsenal occasionally and grab out an old tool just to keep it, polished in case I need it, because I've done it for so long. I still get resentful at times, but I know what to do about it. I still talk bad about people when I get mad because I get judgmental. And I get sick feeling in my gut. Not only I go back and tell the person that I gossiped to, but I got to tell the person I gossiped about. I have a step that allows me to keep the channel clean. And step 7, my sponsor described it like this, and I'll close with this story. He said, the prayer is, my Creator, I'm now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. He said, for those of us that have been married, he said, that sounds like a wedding vow. I'll take you for good and bad, sick and health, poor and rich. I never heard that in 40 some years. And I said, I started thinking about that, maybe meditating on it in my morning routine. And all of a sudden it came to me, if that was the wedding vow, the engagement takes place at step 3 when I ask God, I offer myself to thee. And he always says, yes, Karen, always. And in step 7, there's a vow. In step 11, through prayer and meditation, I believe that like in the wedding, the more I seek him and the closer I get to him, the two become one flesh. And I hope that one day I walk into a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous and you know that God walked inside of me right along with me, that I'm a demonstration of his power, his love, and his way of life, because that's what we said in step 3. Thank you so much for having me. Stephen, wherever you are, we're with you in the fellowship of the Spirit. Karen, thank you for the introduction, and thank you guys for your time.